Hi guys, and welcome back to another DrAce video, and today we're going to be playing MotoGP 21. We're going to be discussing the race recap from Le Mans just yesterday in a very wet couple of Grand Prix from Moto E to MotoGP. So starting off first, we'll be discussing Moto E, and then we'll be discussing the rest of the championships in a moment's time. So Eric Granado managed to take the victory just ahead of Matteo Cassadei and Alessandro Zacconi, a battle that went right down to the wire, which was absolutely awesome. In the final couple of stages, I think it was final lap, Eric Granado managed to get ahead of Zacconi, and I think they even exchanged positions around 2 or 3 times in Ricordamont for the final corner. I did find Zacconi's penalty was a little bit harsh. He exceeded track limits on the exit out of Ricordamont, however, he had a bit of a helping hand through fighting with Eric Granado and made a bit of a mistake and still went onto the green, which I think is a little bit unfair, because if you make a mistake and you're not actually on the bike, you're not in control of the motorcycle and you go off and you go into the green, I think you shouldn't be punished for that. If you went onto the outside of the track and just took an advantage of the outside and utilised the green part of the track, I think that's obviously clearly a penalty. But if you're only touching it due to a little bit of a mistake and you didn't gain a single advantage, in fact you lost a position, I don't see why that really results into a penalty. But the stewards found it fit, and he was unfortunately demoted down to 3rd place as Matteo Cassadei took 2nd place. Tommy Egerton looked like to be a force to be reckoned with during the Grand Prix for a good couple of laps, and then unfortunately it didn't really materialise. Seems he just lost a bit of pace towards the end, but a really fantastic race. There was a lot of crashes. There was even crashes before the race even begun, so even on the sighting lap, Mikel Pons and Mantovani, I think it was, both managed to crash out in the final couple of corners in Le Mans before the race even begun. Pretty embarrassing to say the least. So we are not going to see Moto E for a good couple of weeks now. The next time we're going to be seeing it is in Catalonia for the Spanish GP. So for the time being, if you haven't watched Moto E, I would recommend you check it out and really see that battle unfold, especially towards the end, because it was a great race. After the line, 8 riders were covered by 1.7 seconds, so pretty amazing race for Moto E. It was more like Moto 3, but with electric machines. So now moving on to the only wet race in Moto 3 that I've seen in quite a while, and I've got to say it really ruined the excitement of Moto 3, because Moto 3's classic trains were just so many riders jostling for position, bumping elbows, chucking Dunlop rubber into each other's bikes. It's just absolutely awesome fun. But unfortunately here in Le Mans it was damp and it was sort of mixed conditions. It was wet, but also it was drying at a certain speed. It's one of those really tough ones, and honestly it was still very entertaining and very interesting, but it really spread out the field. The winner was Sergio Garcia, which was absolutely superb. He was really good. Looked like a seasoned veteran, looked like he was poised to take victory from the second it started. So really good stuff from Sergio Garcia. He has been criticised in the past for only really competing at home, but the Spaniard did well here in France, so good job to the man on the gas. And brilliant results. Super happy to have the Czech Republican Filip Salac and the Italian Riccardo Rossi on the podium. It's just so good to see other riders on the podium and see how their confidence will then begin to shine, how they're going to just really develop after taking such a magnificent position. It was super close for Riccardo Rossi as well, and for me, Riccardo Rossi's podium was the best part of the entire Grand Prix, because John McPhee was charging with such pace. I think he was taking 1 or 2 seconds per lap out of Riccardo Rossi's time, and he was just brilliant. And it came down to the final couple of final couple of laps. And then finally, on the final lap of the race, Riccardo Rossi sets a ridiculous lap time, which was way quicker than John McPhee and just completely hindered any chance of John McPhee's podium. Really amazing stuff from such a young man, and someone who hasn't even finished in the top 10 to finish on the podium in great style. Massive thumbs up from me. But of course, in wet conditions, things are treacherous, things are harder. It's difficult for the riders because they're not very experienced in the wet, because we don't get that many wet races. So there did come a lot of faulers and a lot of mistakes from some of the best riders in the Moto3 Championship. Now we'll go down the list of riders that actually crashed, such as Carlos Tatai, Gabriel Rodrigo, championship contender, Jama Masia, another championship contender, Nico Antonelli, coming out of Garage Vert, the same place Jama Masia crashed, another championship contender. And now of course the championship favourite, the man who is taking all the headlines in Moto3 and is leading by a country mile, of course that is Pedro Acosta. Even he succumbed to a crash in this one. but he was extremely good of keeping the motorcycle ready and just continuing to hold the clutch in as he crashed into turn 3. He did a fantastic job and was able to continue the race. I do believe he managed to still finish in 9th place, which is pretty impressive considering he's just been skittled down the road. He was up into turn 3 where he crashed, bike span around, still holding onto the clutch for dear life, and probably had the quickest bike retrieval I've ever seen in my life. It was very, very impressive. Very, very impressive, let me tell you. Well, it was a great result for some of the non-experienced riders, which is always surprising because not many riders like to be called wet weather specialists, but there are certainly a couple of names that we'll have to look at from the future when it's going to be a very wet or damp Grand Prix. So Riccardo Rossi, Yumi Sasaki, Adrian Fernandez did pretty well. That was his best result of the season. Of course, the brother of Raul Fernandez in Moto 2. Jason Dupasquier managing to get into the points. Ethan Guevara into the points as well. Andrea Mino started in pole position, and you know what? I felt like he was going to just have a brilliant race here, but unfortunately for him, not quite the result he wanted, finishing in 11th place. Not really great for the championship, but still, there's a long time to go in this season. Just want to give a mention about Darren Benner as well. Of course, Darren Benner getting taken out into Jerez a couple of weeks ago by a very, very desperate lunge from Dennis Onchu. And unfortunately for him, he finished with no points here today in Le Mans. And you've got to believe his championship challenge is not looking too grand right now. He's going to have to conjure something up towards the rest of the season. Of course, it is still a long season. We've got many, many raw races to go. But Darren Bender's really got to pull something out in the bag here because, in my opinion, he was definitely the championship protagonist or potentially the championship favourite. You've got to look at both Petronas Sprinter riders in that one and say both of those guys should be the cream of the crop. But unfortunately this time, not the case for Darren Benner. Another underperforming rider I want to discuss as well is Dennis Foggia, the Rocket. I'm a big fan of Dennis Foggia and I hate seeing him struggle. And for some reason the Leopard Racing Honda rider is just not getting it right, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what's changed, but it seems to be that Xavi Artigas is kind of showing him up. The rookie rider who was in Red Bull Rookies Cup last season is obviously doing a much better job than Dennis Foggia is right now. And of course Foggia has been unlucky this season. There's been some moments that it's just been bad luck that's come his way. Things not going right in the race. Maybe someone will bump him wide and someone will ruin his race by crashing into him. Of course there's still quite a few riders like that. Kaito Toba, the winner in Qatar 2 years ago, had that victory and then just really didn't see anything from him since. Ayumi Sasaki, not doing too bad, but I expected a little bit better from him as well. There's quite a lot of ups and downs right now in Moto 3, and I think the biggest issue is Pedro Acosta just shining so bright and sort of taking the spotlight from the rest of them. Well, it's still a long season to go, and I've looked forward to doing many more of these and seeing what action can unfold for the next couple of Grand Prix. Mugello coming up next, and of course Mugello is always terrific in Moto 3. So now it is time to discuss Moto 2 and how that race progressed and how it transitioned into something interesting. Because of course Moto 2, as of usual, it's the sort of middle race. It hasn't got the excitement build-up that Moto 3 or MotoGP has, and it's sort of the middle party, if you will. And I really like Moto 2. There's been some terrific races in the past, but then there's also been a lot of boring races. And unfortunately this one was kind of towards the boring one, but it's not a bad thing in the sense of like performance. There were some really great performing riders, but there was a lot of bad performing riders in this one. Well, a big shout out to Raul Fernandez. That guy looks like he's been in Moto 2 for years. I've said it many times before, but the seasoned veteran quote will have to be used here again. He looks like a seasoned veteran, and if he is not in MotoGP next season with Remy Gardner, I will eat a metaphorical hat. So for the time being, Raul Fernandez takes the victory, and Remy Gardner revelled in a second place and then took a 1-point championship lead, which is crucial for Remy Gardner. I'm a big fan of Remy Gardner. I really like him. I love his personality. I love how he's very characteristic and he's very passionate about the sport. And seeing him lead the championship, still a victory is yet to come, but give him time. But he's still leading the championship, and you can't really ask for more than that. Marco Bezzecchi, again, one of my most favourite riders. I even did a little video to say good luck and everything for Marco Bezzecchi early on in the season, and it doesn't look like he's done him many favours as of yet, so maybe I won't be doing it next season. But for the time being, managed to finish 3rd place on the podium, the last rostrum spot, but yet Marco still didn't look too happy, even in Parc Fermé and even on the actual podium celebration. I think something's missing with that Sky VR 46 team right now. Something seems to be lacking. They're constantly struggling with rear grip. Because of course at this point in the race of Moto 2, it was on slicks all the way through. The rain from Moto 3 had dried up and it was a completely dry session, and it seemed that even in cold and somewhat mixed conditions, there was still a few wet patches on the track. Marco Bezzecchi still struggling with rear grip towards the end of the race, and that's a problem they really need to fix. Of course, the Triumph engine is so good. It seems to be the best engine we've had in Moto 2 for quite a while, because compared to the Honda races when it used to be the 600cc Hondas, it seems to be a lot more competitive. A lot of riders are more competitive, they're more interested, and they're more even and more equal. But they're not doing a great job when it comes to the tyre life, especially concerning and comparing it to the likes of Raul Fernandez, Remy Gardner and even Sam Lowes, because those guys can keep some serious rhythm going throughout the entire duration of the Grand Prix. Take a look at Fabio De Antonio in Jerez. And of course, mentioning Fabio De Antonio, a pretty disastrous race for the Italian. He was aggressive, really aggressive, and I'm not sure why. Maybe someone had just peed him off, but he gave, I think it was Hector Gartho, he gave him a right old shove into the couple of corners towards the end, into the blue S's, which netted him an irresponsible racing penalty, and he then did the penalty loop into the long lap penalty, and of course he butchered it. He butchered the long lap penalty and therefore had to do another long lap penalty. So his best result of the race was actually in 8th place, which is pretty good considering he did a double long lap penalty, and remember, double long lap penalty will be coming to that later on in MotoGP. But Fabio De Antonio 8th place, but you've got to look at, he was gifted quite a lot of spots ahead of him. Bad news for the American fans, you're going to hate me bringing this up again, I do apologise, but Cameron Beaubier, Joe Roberts, both DNFing, crashing out of the Le Mans Grand Prix and heading back onto the plane to move over to Mugello. But a big disappointment for Cameron Beaubier, because he set the fastest lap of the race at one point and it looked like he was really moving away through the pack. And unfortunately it came to an end. Same as Joe Roberts, he managed to get up into the inside, into La Chapelle. I think he was in a couple, maybe second spot or even in first place temporarily. Got in behind Marco Bezzecchi going into the Shimano buff, and unfortunately lost the front and ended his Le Mans charge. In the same corner actually, Aaron Canet met his demise in a pretty horrific high side. Now my first reaction to this was a big scream, because it looked like the bike actually landed on top of him. Thankfully I don't think that was the case, because he was able to walk away, and unfortunately we didn't actually see a replay of that incident, but fingers crossed that Aaron's okay nonetheless. But of course, Moto 2, a lot of crashes. Cameron Beaubier, Tom Luthi, who was finally into the points, and unfortunately he crashed out of 14th. Joe Roberts, Xavi Vierge, championship protagonist Sam Lowes even crashed. I think he crashed into turn 3. That corner has caught out so many riders. I do believe last year that was the most crashed at corner, and you can see why. A very difficult corner, and especially when it's in mixed wet or damp conditions. Stefano Manzi crashing out, Alonso Lopez covering him for Montoya, and Augusto Fernandez also crashing out. So dreadful time for the Elfmark VDS racing team, with Sam Lowes and Augusto Fernandez with both 0 points. Of course, more disappointments than there is positives. However, a little bit of a shining star. Tony Arbolino finally smiling, finally upbeat, kidding around in the pits. Oh, it's great to see. He's finally back into it here in the Dynavolt Intact team. He did really well, and you know what? I thought he might get onto the podium, but unfortunately for Tony, he didn't manage it. But Tiger Tony will be back, and I guarantee he'll be on the podium this season if he can remain that same sense of confidence and the main sense of just eagerness to continue to improve. Ben Schneider as well had a terrific race. I know that a lot of the Dutch fans are a big fan of him, and for right reasons. The guy's a big beast, and he still managed to compete very well. He did a grand job. He hung in there as long as he could for 5th place, and he was even in the podium battles for some time, but unfortunately, of course, for him, he didn't manage to stay on, but he did manage to stay in the points, and he managed to stay in 5th place, so great job for him. Final bit to mention as well, Lorenzo Dalla Porta was disqualified after the race had finished. He was under the weight by a kilo. He was 216 kilograms and the limit is 217. So Lorenzo Dalla Porta disqualified right after the race had ended, and therefore no points from this Grand Prix. Okay, so the big one, the beast, the best sport in the world, the best category in the world in my opinion, MotoGP at Le Mans. let's talk about the race winner. I don't think there's going to be one person in the world who's going to be unhappy to see Jack Miller taking another victory. Jack Miller, absolutely awesome race, and I mentioned earlier the double long lap penalty for Fabio De Antonio. Jack Miller, double long lap penalty in the gravel after the blue S's, and still took the victory here in the French Grand Prix. Absolutely superb Jack Miller was. We know Jack Miller loves these conditions, whether it's wet or dry, or drying, or getting damper. He loves these conditions, and it showed today. He was absolutely superb. Of course, winning in Assen in 2016, he did the exact same thing. Race was mixed conditions. You could go to slicks if you wanted to. You could stay in the wets. Exactly what he did today. He went for the medium rear and the soft front, and I think that helped him so much to just continue to push forwards and just continue to have the best of both tyres in there. So when it was really wet, he still had the nice soft spongy tyre, and then when it got really dry, he still had a tyre to help him push out of the final corners, especially from the rear, and especially for the Ducati, which is so powerful and really puts that pressure on the rear tyre. So amazing job from Jack Miller. I'm really pleased to see him take another victory. He's a bit like the buses, it seems. Victory came like 3 years ago, maybe even longer. It's 5 years ago actually. Then finally gets another one Jerez, and then finally gets another one in Le Mans in just 2 weeks. Absolutely awesome. Brilliant job for Jack Miller. Big thumbs up from me. And of course, Johann Zarco, the rider we're using in this video here today, on the wet tyres of course here in the damp and rainy Le Mans. Johann Zarco again though. That name that keeps appearing up in the timesheets every single race. He is doing really, really well, Johann Zarco. And especially considering a couple of years ago his career was on the line, especially with the KTM. He has really turned it around and he is looking brilliant. It's great to see the Frenchman on the podium. And of course, speaking of the Frenchman, we have to move over to the other side of the bikes and the pit lanes. And that's the Yamaha, of course. Fabio Cuatro on the podium yet again. No arm pump to slow him down this week. Manages to take third place. He didn't look too comfortable in the wet compared to the likes of Jack Miller and compared to the likes of Johann Zarco. Zarco took time and time after the race had sort of dried out. The option to change to slick tyres, which no one actually gambled for, and I think that was a smart move because probably about 8 laps remaining. People could have gone in for the different tyres and go for slicks, but at that point you weren't going to really make a difference. You weren't going to win the Grand Prix from being 40 seconds in the pit lane. But brilliant to see Fabio competitive yet again. He is the only consistent Yamaha out there right now. Maverick Vinales, I've said this way too many times, I'm going to say it again, completely unreliable. You just can't bet on Maverick. He looks so good in practice sessions, he looks so good in qualifying, and then Sunday comes and he goes backwards. Really surprising to see Maverick Vinales not do well here in Le Mans, because of course he is very, very competitive in Le Mans. He has a great record here, but it just didn't come to fruition for him, finishing in 10th place. Of course, we still have quite a lot of riders to discuss, so I'm going to try and move on a little bit swiftly. Speaking about Pekko Banya, brilliant again. Still holding the championship lead. He wasn't great in practice, he wasn't great in qualifying, but he managed to stay within himself and still have a great result, finishing in 4th place. And he wasn't that far away from catching up to Fabio Cuatro. He was charging through the grid at one point, but unfortunately for him, he didn't get on the podium, but he still retained a 1-point championship lead for the Italian, so great job from Pekko Banya. He actually qualified in 16th place as well, so food for thought is he still managed to finish in the top points in 4th place. Dillo Petrucci, I mentioned earlier that riders don't like to be called wet weather riders. He is the ultimate wet weather rider. He just loves the wet weather. If every race would rain, he'd be a world champion easy. But unfortunately for him, he doesn't like that particular comment regarding his wet weather abilities. But it's damn true. He is amazing in the wet. Silverstone 2015 and Le Mans, of course, he won here in the wet before. He is great in the wet. That's just the only true thing I could say about Dillo Petrucci, and especially probably the best finish for the KTM this season. And of course, that's coming from the KTM Tech 3 team, the second team, if you will, the satellite. Of course, they do have factory support, but at the same time, it's not the KTM you would think would be up there. So Alex Marquez as well, great result for him, finishing in 6th place. We'll talk about Marc Marquez in a moment, but great result for the LCR Honda rider, who had a bad season so far, to be honest with you. He has not been very good, so it's good to see Alex Marquez getting a bit more confidence and finishing in the top couple of points. So I mentioned Marc Marquez, of course the brother of Alex. Yeah, disappointing race for Marc Marquez. He looked like he had the speed to potentially win this one. But no, it didn't happen at all. Of course, the master changing bikes in the pit lane when conditions are sort of mixed. He crashed twice. Once into Recordamont and the second into La Chapelle. The first crash, of course, was quite a heavy one. Managed to get back onto the motorcycle and start churning out the lap time. Started moving through the pack pretty quickly. He took Luca Marini and he was about to chase down Valentino Rossi before his Grand Prix ended into the kitty litter, and that's where he decided to just call it quits. And I think if you crash twice in a Grand Prix, I also wouldn't look back at the Repsol Honda. I would just walk straight over to the garage and never to be seen again until Mugello. So unfortunately for Marquez, no points. And of course another big disappointment, Aleix Espargaro. He seemed to be flying the flags for Aprilia and got shown up by Savadori in qualifying and then crashed out early on in the Grand Prix of Le Mans. So bad times for Aleix Espargaro. He's got to bounce back in Mugello. Probably a track will be a lot better to the Aprilia, so fingers crossed for Aleix, he will bounce back with shining colours. I'm going to mention the Suzuki boys, because personally for me I think Suzuki have been really disappointing this season. It's harsh to say that because of course Joan Mir has finished on the podium, but it's not been a good season in my opinion for the Suzuki boys. I expected both of them to be up there in the top 4 in the championship, and that hasn't happened. Alex Rins crashing out into turn 3, the second out of the pit lane he crashed. These crashes have got to stop for Alex Rins if he wants any chance of a championship attack this season. Joan Mir lost a lot of points by crashing before he could even change the bike to the wets. Really bad results for the Suzuki team. Did not expect that. I don't think many expected that. I know they both qualified 14th and 15th respectively, but really bad result for the two boys in blue. And of course, I mentioned Lorenzo Savadori. He showed Aleix Espargaro up in the qualifying, didn't manage to show him up in the race. He managed to crash out as well as Miguel Oliveira. So interesting race, honestly. It's not the most exciting race we've had compared to the likes of the Qatar Grand Prix and then the last lap exchanges we've seen this season. But here, it was a very interesting race. I do find the wet weather races, especially for that mixed moment with all changing bikes, is the ultimate excitement. It's just absolute chaos. It's hectic as anything. And of course, Frankie Morbidelli crashing out into the La Chapelle, into the Blue S's, right with a collision with Pol Espargaro and Valentino Rossi. Now, I've tried to look more into this and to find out what on earth happened. And it does look like, of course, Pol Espargaro making the mistake. Rossi, Morbidelli go around the outside, both sides. It looked like, in my opinion, Espargaro should have moved out of the way and accepted that he's lost the positions because of making the mistake. But he went full gung-ho into the corner, which fair play to him, he still had the speed, he was very fast. Unfortunately, due to the collision that all three riders wanted the same spot, Pol Espargaro got bumped by Morbidelli, who in turn bumped Valentino Rossi, and literally all three men went further back as Frankie Morbidelli actually crashed. He actually crashed, hurt his knee, got off of the stretcher, and continued to race like an absolute pro. But bad result for the Petronas Sprinter boys, bad result for Honda. It's been a difficult one for a lot of riders, but shout out to Jack Miller for winning, Zarco in second, and Fabio Cuatro taking third. And that's pretty much it of my Le Mans recap. I really hope you've enjoyed this video so far. I will show you my lap times that I've been doing with Johan Zarco here in Le Mans. Not that my fastest lap times, but at the same time, I'm more interested in chatting to you guys than doing the time trials. So for now guys, that's going to be it from me. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section down below what you would like to discuss. Like, comment and subscribe if you haven't done already, and I will see you next time. So thanks for watching guys, and ciao for now. Oh hi, didn't quite see you there. Good to see you're still here. If this video didn't quite set your appetite, then why not watch some more DrAce content by clicking the video shown on screen now. Furthermore, if you would like to follow me on social media, you can do so now with the links down in the description. Consider subscribing so you don't miss a single DrAce video.